Okay. All right. So, what the heck is going on in Ukraine? I'm going to begin at the very beginning of this course. This course begins in the 1200s. So, and take notes on this because it is world history. It's world history. Do you guys remember learning about the Kievan Rus? Well, the Kievan Rus lived in, let's open up a map. The Kievan Rus around the 1200s were spread throughout, sorry, I was circling Kazakhstan. We're all around in this area. And then around the 1300s comes the Golden Horde. Who were the Golden Horde? Anyone remember who the Golden Horde were? Oh, the Mongols. The Mongols took over this area in the 1300s. And then, let me blow the map up and make it bigger. All right. Then, the 1300s, we had Mongols over here, and we had Lithuanians. There was Lithuania now is just this little bitty country up here. It's a really, really small country. But back in the 1300s, it was a grand empire. And they controlled a whole bunch of this area. So you had Lithuanians here, and Poland was a grand empire. Poland controlled a bunch of this. So you had Mongols, Lithuanians, and Poles that controlled the land that we now call Ukraine. Then in the 15th century, the Golden Horde, that was the strong Mongols. They fell into decline. Well, when they fell into decline, out of the ashes rose up what was called the Crimean Khanate. So the Mongol horde went down, the Crimean Khanate rose up. This is Crimea, and they led from here, and now they're controlling the entire southern region of Ukraine. I'm going to erase all this so it's a little cleaner. And so now you've got this whole region is led by the Crimean Khanate. And then you've got Poland and Lithuania ruling this region until 1795. In 1795, Poland, this empire of Poland, collapses. Poland collapses, and the Western region now comes under control of the Austrian Habsburg Empire. And Lithuania also loses control. And the east of what we now call Ukraine comes under control of the Russian Empire. This is the late 1700s, right about 1800. Well, you should know, please know, always remember the early 1800s is when we saw a rise in nationalism. Rise in nationalism. And this is because of Napoleon. Napoleon brings this fierce French nationalism. But then it's not only it's a French nationalism, but also as he is spreading his French empire, people are resisting against him and saying, I don't want to be part of the French Empire. I want to be German. I want to be Spanish. I want to be Portuguese. I want to be Italian. I want to be whatever I am. And there's this great rise in something that had never existed before. No one had ever really thought of themselves as loyal to their nation before. They had just been loyal to their local king. They had never thought of themselves as a nation. And now there's this rise of what we now call nationalism. And so suddenly, this one ethnicity, these Ukrainian people, what we call an ethnicity, all people that speak the same language, eat the same foods, have the same religion, like the same art, listen to the same music. That's an ethnicity. All of those people that were all the same and spoke Ukrainian as a language, suddenly at the same time that half of them, not really, a little less than half, fell under the Habsburgs, and the rest of them fell under the Russian Empire, they all decided they didn't want to be under the Habsburgs or the Russians. They wanted to be their own nation. They wanted to be Ukraine. We want our own, we want our own nation. And we want it to be called Ukraine. Well, Catherine the Great wasn't having that. She was not having that. She went full Russification on the Ukraines. Russification is forcing them to adapt to Russian ways. They banned use of the Ukrainian language. They banned all kinds of Ukrainian everything and forced people to adapt to the Russian ways. And when this happened, many Ukrainian intellectuals fled the Ukrainian areas and went to Western Europe. So these people that were fierce nationalists and wanted an independent Ukraine left. They're not there anymore. So things went on like that for about 100 years. Now I'm going to fast forward to World War I. World War I is 1914 to 1918. And, oh, I didn't mean to erase. I meant to come over here. 1914 to 1918, you've got war going on all over here. Well, while this is happening in the Russian Empire, which Ukraine is part of, things are terrible. It's bad. People are so poor, and the war is going terribly for them. I mean, it's bad. We're not there yet in this class. You're going to get a full lectures on World War I to find out how miserable it's going in Ukraine, in this area, in the Russian Empire. But things are going really bad for them. So there's World War I is happening, and they are fighting World War I. But in the actual middle of World War I, an additional war happens, which is a civil war inside the Russian Empire. It would be like, let's say, I don't know, let's say Kazakhstan and the United States get into a war. Kazakhstan and the US are in war, but at the exact same time, civil war breaks out here in Kazakhstan. So two wars at the exact same time. They're fighting. So the Russian Empire is fighting World War I, and then there's civil war inside the Russian Empire. And the civil war is completely like crazy because the Russian Empire is gigantic. And let's say this is the Russian Empire, and these people that are fighting over here, these people want one thing, and these people want a totally different thing, and these people want something else, and these people want something else, and these people want something else, and they're all fighting each other, and they're fighting the government, and the war was crazy. The Russian Civil War was crazy. But what the Ukrainian people wanted was independence. They were fighting for their own country. And this was like the ethnic Ukrainians. But in the end, who they were fighting they were fighting against Vladimir Lenin. And Lenin ends up winning the war. And Lenin wins and forces the Ukrainians to join the USSR. Which is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. During the Civil War, sorry, I forgot to mention this. During the Civil War, the Ukrainians had declared their independence. In 1917, the Ukrainians declared independence. They just announced, they said, we are an independent nation. And then Lenin said, no, you're not. You're part of Russia. And they're like, no, we're not. We are an independent nation. No, you're not. You're part of Russia. No, we're not. We're an independent nation. And then there's a war. And Lenin won. And that's when they kind of stayed an independent thing. Like the USSR Ukraine was kind of independent because they were acknowledged as Ukraine, but they were also part of the USSR, which was dominated by Russia. So now it's 1922. The Civil War is over. Lenin has begun the USSR. Ukraine was one of the original Soviets. And it just goes on like that for many years until the Soviet Union, this is the USSR, the Soviet Union collapses in 1991. I was in middle school. This was a really big deal when this happened. The Soviet Union collapses in 1991. And suddenly, all those Soviets became independent nations. Kazakhstan became an independent nation. Ukraine, independent nation. And they have been independent ever since. Now, what the heck is going on today? Have to still give you a little bit of background, little bit more background information. have to give you background information about, like, okay, why is it happening? So I'm sure you all know, just because you're 15 years old and you live on the planet Earth, that there is some kind of weird tension between Russia and the United States. Well, why is that, Mrs. Givens? Sorry, I'm getting hot. Why is that? Okay, so way back, we learned about Karl Marx, and we even did some extra special lessons on I remember we did a whole lesson on how I told you about how they stomped out socialism in America, and we read a news article. And then there was the Red Scare. That was part of the Red Scare. The United States, the entire West, the West, that's not only the United States. We're talking the big three are the United States, France, and Britain. This is the West. And then their friends. Think of countries as individual people, and just, you know, whoever they're friends with. Well, these people are simply terrified of communism. They're afraid of it. They're so afraid of communism. It is a bad word. I'm telling you, I'm American. I was raised in America. It is a bad word. If I'm just like sitting around in a bar with a friend of mine and we are openly talking about communism, some random stranger will come up and start yelling at me. People don't like communism in America. And it goes all the way from your regular everyday person all the way up through the government. It very fiercely anti-communist. Well, in the exact same way, in Russia, they are anti everything Western. It's the same. They're anti-capitalism, like just everything that like I hold dear as an American, like freedom of speech and freedoms of, I don't know, like all kinds of things that just are diametrically opposite from the East and the West. Well, shortly after World War II, this thing called NATO was created. Let's look at NATO. Oh, I typed nada. We can go to the NATO world page. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. I should have pulled up the Wikipedia, but anyway, in basic terms, what NATO is NATO is quite literally an organization of countries that promise to fight communism. That is what it is. NATO is an organization of countries that promise to fight Russia, because Russia is the communist and communism. That is why NATO was created. So if you are a member of NATO, it means you are aligned with the West. Absolutely. Think of this just like when you are in an argument with someone here at school. If you're in an argument with someone here at school and your friends start picking sides, and you're looking around and you want to know, are they siding with me or are they siding with her? And you want to know, well, if someone sides with NATO, they are siding with the West. It's serious. They are definitely anti-Russia, pro-West. Well, Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union, except now Ukraine is actively in the process of trying to join NATO. They want to join NATO. Ukraine wants to join NATO. So how do you guys think that's making Russia feel? I mean, that's what this is about. How do you think Russia feels that Ukraine, that used to be part of their empire, is trying to join a group that the whole reason they were formed was to fight against them? But also, so I'm going to teach you guys a new word, irredentism. Irredentism. 2 days ago, Putin gave a speech that said that we here in Kazakhstan, we should be worried about this speech. Putin gave a speech 2 days ago where he said Ukraine isn't really an independent country anyway, that Ukraine was part of the Russian Empire forever. And it was only Lenin that gave them their independence anyway. And so it should be part of Russia anyway. That's irredentism, that Ukraine was part of Russia before, so it should be part of Russia now. Well, if we're saying that, well, we could go back further and we could say, well, Ukraine was part of the Austrian Empire, so maybe it should be part of Austria. Ukraine was part of the Lithuania Empire, so maybe it should be part of Lithuania. Ukraine was part of Mongolia, maybe it should be Mongolian. So like, where does it stop? How far back how far back do you go? That thing of saying, well, once upon a time, 200 years ago, it belonged to us, so it should belong to us now. That's irredentism. And he said that in a speech 2 days ago. And he also said in a speech yesterday that anyone that attempted to interfere with what he's doing in Ukraine right now will feel a force that no one has ever felt before. So it's a little scary. It's a scary, tense situation right now. And then I want to show you guys the live UA map. This is a live universal awareness map. This map pops up anything that's happening shows up. So like, and then you can hover over it. This is destroyed Russian armored vehicle. This is city of Konotop in the Sumy Oblast is under siege right now. Strikes on Kiev. Ballistic missiles are going into Kiev right now. So yeah, I mean, there are loud explosions heard in Kiev right now. Shells hitting in Bucha right now. And they have a running news thing. So the president announced 42 minutes ago that they have confirmed intelligence saying that they're trying to kill him, that they're coming for him. This is a good website to look at, liveuamap.com. You can find information here for the entire world, but like this is what I looked at during the unrest here when I was in the US. I was watching this, and it had every time guns were reported, every time anything was reported, it popped up on here. So yeah, what he's really, really angry about, what Putin is really angry about, is that Ukraine is aligning itself with the West. Ukraine is trying to, they are actively engaged in trying to join NATO. And that means they're aligning themselves with the West. And he is trying to pull them back toward him. I was jokingly making a correlation with Mr. Givens the other day and saying that it was like a Putin saw Ukraine as a runaway child, and it was like Ukraine's a runaway child, and he's going after his kid and trying to force them to come back. Questions? Anyone? Yeah, of course. It's about what? Yeah, Crimea. Yes.
Then they gave it to Ukraine, and now they're saying that like no, it still belongs to Russia. So like
Sure. Yeah. He did the same thing with Crimea, and so.
huge thing. Like people are always fighting about it everywhere.
Oh yeah. And also, so we'll see, also there are these breakaway regions here in the east and Crimea here. So we'll see when we start learning about World War II, you'll see that it's both a blessing and a curse to learn world history, because you will start seeing patterns in war, patterns in history, and you will recognize things and you'll say, oh, I see this and I recognize it and I see what's happening. We can't do this. It's happened before, it won't work. But no one will listen to you because they don't understand. So in World War II, Adolf Hitler was here in Germany, and he wanted some land here from the Czechoslovakia. It's called Czechia now, but it was Czechoslovakia then. And he wanted Austria. And the West did this thing called appeasement, where, World War I had just happened. Everybody was horrified by it. Nobody wanted another war. And honestly, the West was so afraid of communism at this time, they didn't really think that Hitler was a big thing. They weren't so afraid of Hitler. And so they just appeased Hitler and they let him take a little bit of Czechoslovakia. The Czechs were really angry about it, but they just, overall, the entire West just kind of let him take it. And then he felt emboldened by that. They were like, oh yeah, the West isn't going to do anything about it. And so then he took Austria, and the West continued with their appeasement, and they didn't really do anything about it. And then he felt even more emboldened. He was like, oh, well, I mean, if they're not going to do anything about it, and pretty soon we're involved in World War II all across Europe. Well, now we can make direct correlations, really, very, very. If you know world history, you can make very direct correlations in what's happening right now. It was only in 2014 that Putin took land from Georgia. Putin took land from Georgia in 2014, and the West did nothing. It emboldened him. A few years ago, he took the Crimea from Ukraine. The West did nothing. He felt emboldened. Now he's attacking the entire Ukraine. And honestly, really, I mean, it's only the next day right now. I don't know what the West has done, but what the West has said so far is some real crap. They're like, oh, we're gonna put sanctions down. Putin doesn't care about sanctions. It's not gonna make a difference. It's nothing. If the West doesn't do something serious, he's going to feel more emboldened, and it might get worse. These are direct correlations. It's cycles in history, just exactly like my board right here. We see the same things happen in history over and over and over and over again. And if you learn to recognize the patterns, you can see these, you can recognize these patterns, and you can say, oh, he's doing exactly what this person did 100 years ago, who did the exact same thing that this person did 200 years ago, that did the exact same thing that that person did 1,000 years ago. So yes, I'm glad you brought up Crimea. Yeah. And if nothing is done, if somebody doesn't stand up and say fiercely, strongly, you must stop, then it's just going to keep happening. I mean, where's it going to stop? I mean, if he's saying Ukraine is not actually a country because it once belonged to the Russian Empire, then what he's saying is everything that was the Russian Empire should be the Russian Empire. Well, that's where we're sitting right now. So, I mean, that's 1/6 of the world. The Russian Empire was 1/6 of the world. So, I mean, is Vladimir Putin saying that he wants to take over 1/6 of the world? I don't know. Yes.
So, is there a way involved in that were once controlled by China?
Yes, these, let me fix the map. Yeah, these Baltic states were, these Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, they were part of the Soviet Union, and they're now NATO states. All right. I'm gonna at least end the recording. Go.